there, it's Lindsay Upton the Quilt Quine, and I've been asked to make a wee video about how I get a quilt ready to go onto the frame. So here we go. I've got a customer quilt here. It's got some polywadding, some backing, and this is the top. And the very first thing I do is measure it. Even if they've given me the measurements, I like to double check. That's what we're going to do first. Looks like lots of backing. I like to have the seam horizontal. The back measures 72 inches across, and I don't even need to bother measuring down the way because it looks huge. I've made a note of that. I'm also going to check the wadding because you never know. Sometimes they give you a short bit. There's plenty. I prefer to attach my quilt back with zips rather than pins. So that's what I'm going to do first. I've set up my domestic sewing machine with its biggest straight stitch, which is about 1/4 inch long. I know that the back is 72 inches wide, which means that it's 36 inches each way of the middle. Now, if you want to watch my zipper video, you'll see what I'm on about, but I'm going to take my first zipper and I'm going to start sewing it on at 36 inches at the sewing machine. I'm going to attach the quilt back to my zippers. I have to make sure that when I start at the top end, the quilt back inside or the wrong side is facing me. I'll run my hand down the edge to the bottom of the backing. Then I make sure that I sew this onto my bottom leader with the right side facing me. Same process, and I start at 36 inches. Top and bottom attached. So the next bit's going to be quite easy because I have colour coded the zips so that I know which way up it all goes. First I'll zip on the top, and I know it's the top because it's got white tape measures attached. Then I'll roll it up, then I'll zip on the bottom. Just watch and see. Ready? Zip it on. Then I'll give it a bit of a shake, get it all straight. Ideally, I would wind this on with the handle that's on the end of the quilt frame, but for me, in my studio, it's tucked behind the monitor and wedged in beside a cupboard, so I'm going to have to use the rollers, I'm afraid. So I have my quilt back ratchet on. This one is off, and I'm going to roll, and I'll pause every time it looks like I've got a big rock up. I'm not too worried about getting the odd kink in it at this point because I'm actually going to wind it again when I get to the bottom. But you do have to be careful not to stretch anything. It's a bit crinkly here in the middle where the customer has joined two pieces of fabric together, but she has listened to my advice and snipped into the generous seam allowance. And when I'm nearly at the bottom, I'm going to zip it to the other pole. So this is the bottom edge of the quilt back, and it's being zipped onto the back roller. There we go. Now again, I can't really reach my handle. I might try and stand in the middle, and then I can smooth as I go. I'll release that ratchet so it doesn't make that noise. Confession time, I could do with new leaders. They're stretched a bit, but they still work. So I'm smoothing out the worst of the wrinkles, hopefully keeping the sides of the quilt back straight. Considering that this is a stretchy flannel, it's gone on quite nicely. Next thing I want to do is see if I can push the sew head to the back roller because I want to stitch a dead straight line across the top to make sure that everything starts off straight. So it'll be a couple of inches down from where it got attached to that leader. I'll just push the machine out of the way. Now it is time to pull up the bar that you're going to attach the top to. Some people float, but I do this. I could use pins, I could use zips. I have chopped up pieces of red snappers because I have a rod in here to clip them onto. Next comes the quilt top. It doesn't really matter which way up this one goes because it hasn't got a picture on it, but a rough rule of thumb is upside down and back to front. So in this case, just back to front. I could measure it to make sure it was dead centre, but I can see that this backing has plenty of space either side, so I'm just eyeballing it. My little red clips just snap on. I don't need very many, they can be about 6 inches apart. Don't stretch anything. Next thing to do is carefully roll this up. I can see the wrong side of the patchwork. I'm not going to stretch it, but I just want to keep it not wrinkled. Next job is to post in the wadding. This is poly wadding. In between the patchwork and the back. I need to make sure that I distribute it evenly. That looks good. Then I run my hand in the top here. There are no pins, so I'm not going to risk catching my hand on anything sharp. Excellent. Next, I'm going to run a basting line across the top. I have cleaned and rethreaded my machine already, so I'm going to go BSR 3, 4 stitches per inch. I'll just knock my tension back because I know that it likes 3-ish with this thread, which is a poly. I'm just very gently pushing the machine against the back bar or pole. Now I have a dead straight line across the top. I'm going to use that to line up the top of my quilt. As you can see, I do not currently have the belts engaged for Q-matic, so everything's running freely. Gently place the top of the quilt along the guideline. So I've got the top of the quilt sitting along the guideline. It's stretchy flannel fabric. Not all customers piece accurately, so you just have to do the straightest job you can. Now I'm going to baste that on. That's the end. Now I'm just going to give myself a little bit of extra space at the top. Clamp that one on. Clamp this one on. Now it is time to stick my head underneath and check for wrinkles. And in this case, it's wonderfully flat. So what I can do now is very gently bring down my roller. Okay, it might magnetise into place, but it might just hang there. It's fine. Give the top a smooth. Here's another gadget I like to use. These things that are shaped like pipes are called quilt clips, and they just keep everything neat and tidy. I'm going to baste down the sides. Remember to go back into BSR 1 or 2 after you've basted, otherwise you'll have giant stitches. This elastic cord that I happen to have was an idea from a Facebook group called VG Quilting, and the idea is that you can use these toggles to make sure that your sides don't come in or out too much. So if I put it on the edge, it will remind me that that is where the edge is supposed to be. And you can put the others in the middle or whatever. If the back was saggy, which it isn't in this case, I could use my side clamps. Here, I have attached magnetic extenders to these. If I'm using my side clamps, I like to just push a yardstick underneath to just raise them up a little bit so that the machine doesn't get held up by the elastic sides. Finally, before I want to start quilting, I will check the tension, particularly after I've cleaned the machine, changed the needle or changed the thread. So I shall bring my thread up to the top. I might do a couple of straight lines up and down, followed by a few wiggles to check that the stitching looks good on the top and underneath. The tension might look very nice on the top, but you really do need to check on the back. I have this gadget, which is a hand mirror with a clip-on selfie light attached, and I just have to poke it underneath, tilt it at an angle, and I can see that the tension looks great. This quilt is now ready to get done. I'm planning on doing this with Q-matic after the weekend. So I just bring the sew head off the middle of the quilt and I will engage the belts. Then everything is totally ready to go. Then I can just switch it off and walk away, come back Monday morning, ready to get started.